Welcome to the series Mesopotamia. In minutes, these videos are for those of you who want to learn more about ancient history but just don't have the time. For longer programs in this video, we'll take a very quick look at the Sumerians if you'd like to test your knowledge of this material at the end. Check out the short quiz via the link in the video description. I know your time's precious, so let's begin. The Sumerians were a people of ancient Mesopotamia whose civilization flourished in what's today southern Iraq. In the 3rd millennium BC, we today called the land that they occupied Sumer, which is derived from the word Sumerum, the Akkadian language name for their homeland. However, the Sumerians called their country Kyangar, and themselves Sajiga, meaning the black-headed people. The origins of the Sumerians, specifically where they came from, is one of those perplexing questions that archaeologists and historians just can't seem to definitively answer. Showing up in the archaeological record in the 4th millennium BC, were they newcomers to the region, or did they just simply evolve out of the existing indigenous peoples who were already there? It's hard to know. Based simply on archaeological evidence, analysis of the Sumerian language also reveals that it's unlike any other known to have existed. What we do know is that by the early Bronze Age, the Sumerian language had become the dominant form of communication throughout much of the region, though there were several other earlier settlements in various parts of the world. The Sumerians are credited with constructing the first real cities. Two of these cities, which may have been established around 4500 BC, if not earlier, were Eridu and Uruk. Within a few centuries, Sumer became dotted with several other urban centers, including Nippur, Adab Lagash, and Umma. These cities eventually took up the characteristics of small countries, and for this reason, we call them city-states. Eventually, these city-states transitioned into what scholars and historians call the early dynastic period of Sumer, which spanned from approximately 2900 to 2334 BC. For the most part, these Sumerian city-states had several things in common. For one, they were generally along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, or one of their many branches. They also had high walls to protect the temples, palaces, administrative buildings, streets, houses, and of course the people that lived within them. At the center of nearly all of them was a large religious sanctuary known as a ziggurat, which was a step-like pyramid structure and the tallest building in each city. In addition, each city-state controlled acres of farmland that were lined with canals and dotted with supporting villages. Another important aspect of Sumerian city-states was that each had a specific patron deity, or a god or goddess that in theory protected or presided over the city. Sumerian religion was polytheistic, meaning that its adherents believed in more than one god or goddess. For example, the god of the moon Nana was the patron deity of the city of Ur, whereas Inanna, the goddess of love, fertility, and also war, was the patron deity of Uruk, though occupying the spiritual world, and generally separated from the affairs of humans. The respective city-state of each deity was considered to be its terrestrial home, on a practical level running the day-to-day affairs of the city-state and surrounding areas was ultimately the responsibility of mere mortals. At the top of the Sumerian hierarchy was a ruler called an Ensi, meaning lord, or in some cases especially if he ruled over more than one city. Alugal, meaning great man. Basically, they were like kings initially. Their power and importance were relatively limited, since most authority in the city-state was exercised by the temple priesthood. As time went on, there became a greater separation between religious and secular authority, with a number of rulers becoming so powerful that they were able to extend their influence over neighboring city-states. One of the most famous examples of this was King Eannatum of the city-state of Lagash. When the 25th or 24th century BC not only expelled Elamite invaders from Sumer, but also ended up conquering the rival city-states of Uruk, Lagash, Kish, and a few others. One of the best-known sources of information on Sumerian political history is what's known as the Sumerian King List, compiled by scribes over the course of several centuries. The Sumerian King List records the names of many of the rulers and dynasties of the various city-states and kingdoms of Sumer. In addition, the list also alludes to which city-states were the most powerful during a particular time period. The earliest rulers on the list, most of whom were mythical kings and heroes, were said to have ruled for tens of thousands of years, which obviously isn't true. The document's value to scholars really comes from analyzing the latter centuries of the list. The kings here were actual historical figures whose existence has been corroborated by archaeological evidence. Several versions of the Sumerian king list have been found, with the oldest one dating to the 2nd millennium BC. Though many details of their civilization are still murky, there's no doubt that the Sumerians were an extremely innovative people. From what archaeologists have uncovered so far, it's clear that Sumerian city-states were able to organize their societies in a way that fostered a high degree of cooperation, ultimately leading to many large-scale projects such as the building and maintenance of city walls, temples, and complex irrigation systems. One of the most famous, as well as practical inventions, was the development of the world's first known written script. We call this writing system cuneiform. Initially, such writing was produced by pressing the ends of a wedge-shaped reed into soft wet clay tablets, which were then dried and hardened in the sun. Though seemingly cumbersome, Cuneiform tablets could last for centuries if not millennia. To date, tens of thousands of cuneiform clay tablets have been uncovered by archaeologists from all over Sumer. The vast majority of these are administrative records, business contracts, ledgers, and accounts of various commodities. However, a number of these tablets also contain hymns, prayers, the inscriptions of kings, early law codes, and even epic poetry, the most famous one being the Epic of Gilgamesh around 2330 BC. Sumer was conquered in its entirety by an Akkadian king named Sargon the Great, despite the Akkadian language becoming the official one, especially for administrative purposes. Sumerian was still widely spoken by the majority of people in Sumer shortly after the demise of Sargon's Akkadian dynasty. Around 2200 BC, Sumerian once again became the official language of the region under what are known as the Neo-Sumerian kings of the Third Dynasty of Ur. These kings did much to revive the culture, language, and traditions of Sumer's early dynastic period, a time that they deemed to be the glory years of Sumerian civilization. Like that of the Akkadian kings, the rule of the Neo-Sumerian dynasty declined and eventually collapsed in 2004 BC. By then, newcomers, each with their own culture and traditions, had already entered the region, effectively changing the ethnic and linguistic makeup of Sumer. By 1800 BC, Sumerian had ceased to exist. As a spoken language, a new society was being formed that mixed Sumerian culture with those of the Akkadian and Amorite-speaking peoples to create what we today know as Babylonian civilization. Despite this, Sumerian maintained its prestige as a literary and liturgical language that was still taught in scribal schools, perhaps up until the 2nd or 1st century BC, and of course, the Sumerians' influence on Babylonian and ancient Assyrian culture and religion pervaded both societies throughout their existence. So I hope that this short video gave you a glimpse into the world of ancient Sumer and the Sumerians. If you'd like to test your knowledge of this topic, check out the link with some questions in the video description. As always, thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. If you learned something or simply just enjoyed the video, please don't hesitate to hit that like button, because it helps the channel out a lot. Also, check out the History with Sai podcast, where I go into more detail with regard to some of the topics discussed on the channel. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Take care and stay safe.